Thanks everybody for reconvening. I was saying to some of you earlier that the wonderful people at AEI, Rebecca Good and Ian Rowe, have conspired to make you go to every inch of this building in the course of our gathering this today and last night. We're here, we're going in the dining room in a minute. We were up on the roof, and so you see we're trying to just show off as much as we can. And I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank the organizers of this conference. It really was outstanding. I was here for a lot of it, and we really convened some really outstanding scholars, and we learned a lot together. And as I think I've tried to convey in previous gatherings, this is a community that we want to continue talking to each other and sharing and working together on these problems that our country faces. And so this isn't a one-off. This is the third of these conferences, and we'll have another one soon enough. And so thanks for being here, and thanks for participating. And you all are participants and part of our community. And joining us tonight is a member of our community as well, in that certainly she's a neighbor. Right down the street is Brookings. Brookings is a little bigger than AEI. A lot bigger.
But the building is not nearly as nice.
Did you hear it?
I'm just going to say, I've got serious building envy here, Robert.
Yes. And I'll take that. But since coming to Brookings, first of all, Cece is someone well known in the public policy world for many years. She was the dean of the School of Public International Affairs at Princeton. I knew her there. She was the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Biden. I knew her then. She used to, it was one of my favorite things is to show that I was working hard by walk out of the building at 7:30, and there was Cece coming up the street, walking back from the White House to her apartment. And I'm sure you did it at 10 and 11 and 12 some nights. And then after serving the president, she came to Brookings. And since coming to Brookings, we've seen more of each other because some of our issues that we face as think tank presidents are similar. And it's been very helpful to have a friend and a colleague that we can talk together about those issues. And so I've really appreciate your friendship, Cece, and your service, and for joining us here tonight.
My pleasure.
So I thought just to further the introduction of you, is ask you, how does one come to be this prominent academic, this chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and this president of Brookings? And what is your story? Give us a little sense of your story, and is it an example of rising opportunity for Americans?
So thank you. The commute was kind of tough
to
get here, but I really thank you for having me here this evening, Robert, because I really would have liked to have been here for the entire conference. This is the work that I have done and focused on in my academic life and also my personal life, and so thank you for hosting this conference, and it's nice to be here. Okay, my personal story. In many ways, I think my personal story does say something about the progress for Black Americans, but we also know that it's not we can't declare mission accomplished. So let me get to it. So both parents born Depression era-ish, but both my mother's family and her father in particular was very committed to education. Educated all three of his daughters. In fact, one of his, they grew up in South Bend, she grew up in South Bend, Indiana, and it was a very close community. And several members of his family were like, what are you doing educating those girls? You should be fixing the car. And he was like, no, we really value education. So she went to IU and ended up with bachelor's degrees, ended up with a master's in social work, et cetera. My father grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, was the seventh, I think, of 8. And there were like 2 families, like his oldest sister is like 20 years older than he is, and there's sort of 2 families, and he was whip smart. And like the story that goes with him is at one point he was like 3 and had walked downtown, and some neighbors said to my grandfather, hey, Carl, I saw him downtown by himself. He's like 3. My grandfather quipped, if he found his way there, he'll find his way back. and he did. And my dad ended up, because of the World War II, they sent him to, I think it was, I want to say Columbia, NYU in New York, and he was doing drafting. He was always very good at math. And then he ended up going to Okay, I'm just blanking on where he went to college. It was in Ohio, the one that merged men and women. But here's the thing that I really want to say. My dad was the first black to get a PhD from Caltech in physics. And so my family, there was a huge emphasis on education in my family. So I don't cook. My siblings cook, but there was such an emphasis on education. All three of my parents' children went on to get PhDs. My sister is on the faculty with me at Princeton. She's an anthropologist. So at many measures, my dad, when he came out, so this was in the mid-50s, he actually had a postdoc down here at the Naval Research Lab. And he came up to, I think, to interview for a postdoc or something at the Institute for Advanced Studies, and they said, we don't have people like you here. And so he just got back on the train. He did most of his career in private industry, although he published on the side. And continued his own work on the side, which I now look at and think, oh my gosh. But then you go another generation through, and all three kids have PhDs. Two of his kids are on the faculty at Princeton. So that's real progress. And if you look at the national data, back in 1950 or so, 2.3% of blacks had a BA or higher. And you fast forward to today, and it's more like 28%. So that's real progress. But 28% is we need to be doing better. It's not mission accomplished. And so how did I get here? I don't know. It's a combination of hard work and dumb luck, right? So I was very interested in policy, always have been. My mom suggested I take an economics class. First I hated it, and then I realized you can answer interesting questions with economics. Not that it's the answer, we could have a conversation about that, but I think that there are a lot of concepts in economics that help frame out how to attack a problem and therefore think about solutions, and I really like that framing out of how to think about problems. And so that's what drew me into economics, but I went into it because of its application to policy. So,
okay. So it is I know that anecdotes are not data and are not necessarily evidence, but your story is a story that reflects achievement and taking advantage of opportunity through education.
Exactly.
And
some luck.
And some luck. Now I want to talk about, we've had this amazing day where we've talked about all the major issues facing all Americans. And one of those issues that we started out with was family issues concerning raising children in single-parent families and the benefits of marriage, the benefits of two active and involved parents for the long haul. We had Melissa Carney, we had Jim Heckman talk about that, and we had others in the discussion talk about that. Do you at this point in the national debate, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot as a former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors in a Democratic administration, do you challenge that finding that marriage and two parents really do make a big difference in the successful raising of children?
The way you have just phrased it, I'm not going to challenge it.
Well, that's not.
Right? I think when you have two parents, you have more resources when it comes to both financial resources in terms of the time you have available to help with the kids. Raising kids, we see a multitasker at the back of the room, right? It takes a lot of time, and if you have two people who can contribute to it, whether they're, separation of whatever, right? There's a huge advantage there. I think the challenge is, what's the causality and what do you do? What is the policy around it? Or does that mean we're going to force everybody, randomly force everybody to get married? Or really, we want to have all of our policy oriented towards encouraging marriage? And I'm not saying I'm opposed to encouraging marriage, but I think that child outcomes are so complicated. Successful marriages are so complicated. David Otter and his co-authors, Dorn and Gordon Hanson, they can see when we had the China shock and that decreased the wages of men, that decreased their likelihood of getting married and other outcomes. So it's how to keep a marriage together and having that healthy place to be raising these children, I think is much bigger than simply we should be having marriage.
Agreed, but promoting marriage, you seem to indicate, would not be a terrible thing to do, to talk about the outcomes or the success sequence, which the scholars at Brookings have been the first to promote. But Melissa Carney, for instance, was here, Dr. Carney, and you know her well. She's a former Brookings-affiliated scholar. She talked about the really frankly, upsetting to her attacks that she received for writing her book about the two-parent privilege. And how about that? I mean, don't you think there's can I just throw out that maybe there's an extremism to some of the rhetoric that comes when people bring these issues that comes from the left, that maybe it would be good politically even for the leadership of the Democratic Party to discourage? How about that? Could I get you to say that?
Man, I'm set up here, Robert.
No, I want you to say, it's in the notes. I told you.
I know. So, what I would say is I'm not going to speak to the political rhetoric or how the Democrats, right? Even when I was at the Council of Economic Advisors, we're like the little think tank within the White House. We spoke truth to power, right? I've never played the political game very well, so no one hired me for my political chops. Right. But I would say that on both sides, like I don't think we want to be adamant, it's marriage at all costs, because some marriages are toxic, and that's not healthy for children. And so I would think that the emphasis needs to be on what's the right environment for children to grow up healthy and happy. What do their neighborhoods look like? So my colleague Andre Perry has done work showing that healthier neighborhoods. This is not causal, right? This is just a correlation. It's an association that you see. Marriage rates are higher in healthier neighborhoods where there's more wealth, where there's more education. And so I think we want to be thinking about the wraparound, and we want to be thinking about the environments in which children are being raised and that they have the adequate resources. Marriage is an important institution in that.
Yeah. And I would just say, I have the similar problems, by the way, that we're describing here on the more left side of the political spectrum, that sometimes we have people that all they want to talk about is marriage, and not the benefits of various forms of education or aid that can address the fact that not all kids are raised in married parent families. And so, Professor Heckman was quite eloquent about the importance of parenting education for families who can be better parents even if they are not married. And I think that's something that is sometimes forgotten from the perspectives on the right. So. The next one I wanted to ask you about was we've had a lot of discussion from Ben or Dan, I can't remember which one it is. It's Ben, who represents the great work that Raj Chetty has done. And he talked about where work exists and the benefits of work in a community. And he seemed to be showing that the biggest indicators of upward economic mobility for low-income people, black, white, or Hispanic, are that there's a lot of work in the community, in addition to being a lot of married families and strong fathers in the community. That sounds okay to you?
Yeah.
Work is good?
Work is good, and I would, and I think again, work is one way to also encourage marriage, right? So,
yes.
Right, work is very good.
Okay. All right.
I think all around, I think that is part of our challenge in this country right now.
Right.
Is, if you think about the decline in labor force participation for men over several decades, I think that's a real problem. And I think it's one that, has been a little bit tied to the, I'm not trying to say I'm a protectionist and all the things, but globalization and technological change has definitely had an impact there, and we have not figured out a way to get them back re-engaged in other productive activities.
Do you think that we have a scholar here, Brent Orrell and Harry Holzer, and they do a lot of work together, and I know Michael Strain and others have said in the past, not speaking about the recent past, but in the distant past, labor workforce programs coming out of the Department of Labor, employment programs, had not a great track record of success, but they've gotten better. Do you agree with that? Has that world gotten a little stronger?
So there is a huge challenge for how we evaluated the impact of these training programs. Actually, Jim Heckman's written a lot about it. So if you go back to JTPA, for example, right? Someone would be in JTPA, and even if you did the randomized evaluation, because that's what a lot of it is based on, so you're randomized into JTPA. If you're in the control group, what did you do? You went and took a class at the community college, which is sitting in the same classroom as the JTPA. So there was a pollution of the control group, where they were actually getting some of the service. So that decreased the estimated impact of job training.
Okay.
So I think we have a time series challenge with some of how we actually
This is the second time we've had a reference to the pollution of the control group in this conference, and frankly, and I'm embarrassed to say this. I had not seen that happen once in a conference in many years. So Jim Heckman did it the first time in saying that Head Start was more successful than people realized.
For exactly the same reason.
Okay,
Exactly.
well,
You have to pay
okay.
attention to what's happening in the control group.
Okay. All right, now let's turn to education for a minute. And we'll do one first, and then we'll do a tougher one second, okay? So that's fair?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Our scholar, Nat Malkus, is one of the leading scholars of the learning loss that resulted in part from the closures of the schools during COVID. We all made mistakes during COVID, I think, including scholars at AEI. Looking back, how do you feel about the school closures during COVID? What is your feeling for what really happened there, and could we have done better?
I think this is so hard. I mean, like, can we all just go back? What is it now, 5 years? Yeah. Right, we had this new virus. Is it, first we were told you don't need to wear masks, we don't think it's airborne, but you do need to wash your vegetables or your groceries when you get home. Like, do you need to, like, we really didn't understand what this virus was. Then we understood it was very contagious and it was spread, through aerosol, which is really the hardest in terms of how rapidly it was passed. So we knew nothing, and we had no natural defenses against it, right? We didn't have a vaccine that would work, and it was foreign to our bodies, so it was devastating. And so I am sort of patient and give some grace to those who are making decisions at that time, because we did not have a lot of information.
We didn't know, we didn't know.
We didn't know, et cetera. Do I look back and think, wow, what a shame on the schools? Absolutely. The virus was not nearly as critical for young children, but the teachers were still at risk. And we can talk about teachers' unions and all the things, but the teachers were still at risk. And so I don't know how we square that. I do know that it's like it was a shame that our kids were dispersed on so many levels. The learning loss is part of it. The social isolation, the lack of developing social skills, the mental illness. Yeah. I think there's on a whole host of levels. The impact on women's labor force participation. We learned that schools actually are another form of childcare, and so yeah. I think the closures of schools were profoundly devastating for our communities and for our young people in particular. But I think it's kind of hard to say, knowing what we knew then. Can I really definitively say it was a mistake? Well, if I knew now, I would say it was, but that was a different situation.
So you are being very patient and hospitable. You can always turn them back on me.
So what do you think?
I think that politicians listened to public health experts who came in and said, well, you could do that, but someone may die. And they became frightened, and they allowed public health experts that were predicting mortality in small populations, but still mortality, to run the policy setting for the entire metropolis or state.
I think that's
and
right. That
was, as you and I have both worked for politicians, when you go in the room, you have the economic experts, you have the social welfare policy experts, you have the education experts. You want the politicians to take it all into account and then make a decision based on all the factors. But in this particular circumstance, because of the fear, public health experts ruled the day. And that was, I think, harmful.
I would agree with you on this too. And I think even, so when we went into when I was in the Biden administration, I think even the public health people who were running the COVID team, they understood that they needed to have more economists and other social scientists as working with the public health experts, because they didn't take into consideration, they didn't weigh the costs and benefits. They were single-mindedly focused on, as you just said, mortality, and not thinking about the opportunity cost. Okay, we could go to how we've underfunded our public health system and all the things, but, so I would agree with you on that front. Again, this came out of left field.
So sticking with schools for a minute, and we didn't have him this year, but in previous, both conferences before, we had Roland Fryer join us. And one of his findings of his work is that high-performing charter schools that offer choices for kids to opt out of the traditional public schools really do better in offering opportunity and economic opportunity for low-income, poor, Black, Hispanic, white children. What about that? What's your, now looking at the school choice literature and the charter school literature? We know in New York City, Success Academy is, they're serving 20,000 kids. They outperform every school in the state, not just the schools of low-income kids. Do you have where are you on that?
There are good and bad schools everywhere.
Okay.
And yes, there are high-performing charter schools, there are low-performing charter schools. When people look at charter schools in general, the results are kind of mush because there are good schools and bad schools in the public sector. Which charter schools are part of the public sector, but even if you look at traditional public schools, there are good schools or bad schools. If you look at private schools, there are good schools or bad schools. So I think what's more interesting to me is what makes a school good, and how do we try to get more schools to be good. Do I think that having choice can be positive? My kids were in private school their entire lives. I'm not going to argue against choice. Do I think it will save our public school system? No. I think it makes a difference for the families because I think they're good. There are good and bad schools everywhere.
One of the things that's interesting about the high-performing schools that offer choice is the enormous emphasis they put on parents.
Exactly.
And well, you say exactly, but isn't that a good thing to engage the parents in a very significant way in the education and raising of their children?
Absolutely, but you can't scale it. You can't, in fact, you even have kids and families that are kicked out of some of these schools because the parents aren't capable of engaging. So there's no question, right? That's part of the secret sauce, and I'm not trying to dismiss that, right? That is part of the secret sauce, and we have to understand that. But then for the kids who happen to be born to parents who are not capable of doing that, what are we doing for them? And so I think we have to understand how do we, in traditional schools and other schools, how do we have a better school system more generally?
Another topic that came up during the conference quite a lot, Ian set the topic right up from, I think, the very first slide he put up, concerned preferences based on race in education or employment. And as you know, the court outlawed affirmative action in college admissions. You may have noticed that President Trump has made ending DEI a very high priority. I have noticed that that there's been less of a negative outrage opposition to that than I would have anticipated from the various communities in our country. Maybe that there's an acceptance that we do need to treat people as individuals, not based on their race. How are you seeing that debate playing out? And what's your sense, also as a former educator at Princeton?
I think this is a hard one. I think this is a really hard one. First of all, I wrote a couple of amicus briefs on the side of the defendants in that affirmative actions case.
Harvard and, by the way, yes. University of North Carolina.
Yes, exactly. Not for the University of North Carolina, but the Harvard.
Okay.
And it was not for Harvard writ large. It was the statistical analysis that David Card had done, which I'm just going to tell you was a lot cleaner than the analysis that had been done for the other side. And the courts, though, don't know how to deal with statistical analysis. They don't know how to read it. It was very technical and very detailed. But there was not the statistical basis to conclude that they had been exercising the kind of affirmative action that the court alleged. Court makes their decision on many factors, but I'm just telling you, I've been through all of that data. David Card. So, this goes to the heart, though, of how do we think of merit, and what do we think of having representation of along a number of dimensions, in our various institutions, including in schools, including institutions of higher education. And so, we know that class was one. We know, if you're born to the top 1%, those kids are far more likely to go to an Ivy League school than a kid who's born to a middle-class family.
Well, would you encourage universities to go to an affirmative action based on class?
So that's not going to I was more of a fan of a lot of these institutions, now not all. So the University of North Carolina is an example where they can't do this. They have far too many applicants, they can't spend the time. Harvard has the resources, well, they did before. They're going to have no endowment tax and no grants. But anyway, aside, but in the early days, in the pre-days, they had money to spend on admissions teams who could spend a lot of time digging into applications. And any admissions officer at one of these schools will tell you they could admit a class 12 times over. So there's a point at which you are throwing darts, right? You're throwing darts. And that's just the way it is. You have limited number of spots, and you're going to have to make choices somehow. So I think that if there's a value to having, I think we should have lower income students have a chance. Absolutely. But I also know, right, the evidence kind of suggests from California, from Texas, if you go just based on class, you're going to start to see declining numbers of Black students. And I think that's a loss. So this is a wicked problem. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a straight answer here, which is why I think it's really too bad that we've at least for the better resource schools to have it taken away, that they have some discretion here. Because they do see a lot more than what people think that they see, but it doesn't allow them to define merit how they want to define merit. And it's not just based on an SAT score. I teach, I can tell you, it is not just based on an SAT score. I do not want to teach a class full of kids who all have perfect scores on their SATs and all have straight A's. They're not necessarily the most interesting kids in the class. And so, this is a hard conversation. We don't have hard conversations in this country anymore. It's not.
We do here at AEI.
We do. We should. But it goes to how do we think about merit and how do we think about the value of having. I think diversity is really important. I love to hear from my colleagues who are raised abroad, who are from Kentucky, who are because they have a different viewpoint on any problem we're trying to solve.
So pursuing that diversity point, which I think is a very good one, and I completely agree with it, and also on what I call economic integration. I could get this wrong, but my conclusion of the Chetty work is that communities that are economically integrated by class, different people from different class backgrounds, are together in a community. They see each other. They are aware of each other's habits and behaviors. Their contacts are available. Low-income kids raised in those kinds of economically integrated communities or neighborhoods are more likely to rise up than those who are raised in high concentrations of all poverty. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a pretty simple conclusion. I don't know that you would contest that. My question is, how do we get more economically integrated neighborhoods?
So that's the fatal flaw of moving to opportunities and those things.
Right. Yes.
We can't scale it. How do you
But you don't have to move
that?
everybody. You can also just do greater private sector development in low-income mm-hmm. communities. It's happened a lot in New York City. It's happened in cities all across America. So there's nothing wrong with that,
no,
right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, because again, I want to go back to it's having healthy communities is what breeds healthy kids, right? And so absolutely. I think we want to be finding ways to...
Lower cost housing.
Yep.
Less regulations.
Better educational systems.
That's right.
Health
more
systems.
Yeah.
Health systems.
All right. So, okay.
More choices anyway.
Last question, and then we'll open it up to the discussion. I didn't go to this session, but I've seen his work quite a lot, and that is our scholar Rui Teixeira. And there was a discussion of the changing vote of the African American population in the United States, Hispanic population also, and that fact that the working class population in America appears to have moved toward the right and in support of Trump. What's your reaction to that? What is it about the various messages of the two parties that you think cause that? And what do you think the Democratic Party should do to reclaim the working class vote that it lost?
I am from a nonpartisan institution, so I'm going to ask you that question, Robert.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you gave me that opportunity. It would be nice to welcome with enthusiasm back to the Democratic Party the former president, Bill Clinton, and treat him like a hero or a good president that he was, and maybe not a hero, but certainly welfare reform and efforts on crime and business development. The era of big government is over. Those was a good time. I do think that and Rui would say this, that the capture of the party by the most extreme part of the party has made it less attractive to the middle of the country, and the middle of the country wins elections. And so yeah, and I think that my own personal view is that there are some sort of cultural issues, one of which does involve immigration and the rule of law, and another involves treating people based on their character of themselves as an individual, not by race, that working class Americans like, and they would like to see more of that from the party that's on the left of the center. I also would say I was very impressed by the extent to which when Democrats in New York State tried to undo the success of the charter school network in New York City and Success Academy, the anger that came from the working class communities, Black, Hispanic, Asian, to fight that. And that showed again that they're not loyal to the party, they're loyal to the issues that are going to help their families. And so, yeah, I believe in healthy politics and debate. And
Okay, I'll give an answer too.
Yeah,
which
okay.
is, I actually think that there are some really wicked problems we have in our country, and I don't think either party is actually solving them. I think we have income inequality that is only going to get worse with all the digitization, because if you think about things online, network effects is where we go to Amazon because that's where everybody is. We're on the various social media platforms because that's where everybody is, and so that means whoever owns those platforms is just getting wealthier and wealthier, and so that's going to be driving more. If you think about climate change, that's a really naughty problem. It's a wicked problem that we are not addressing. You may not believe that it's by going electric, fine, but we know that the changes in the climate are costing us, whether it's dealing with the after effects of hurricanes, wildfires, people moving, and migration, right? We know, and we have to be addressing that. If you look at our country and worldwide, we have fertility rates that are dropping. So our dependency ratio is rising because we have the baby boomers are retiring and we're not seeing young people, which means if we're going to keep having productivity based on the labor force, we need to have immigration, which is a huge political problem, which nobody has been able to touch since Ronald Reagan, right? Even George Bush, the son, right, tried to do immigration and got his head handed to him. So we have these very existential problems. I think the current administration offered seemingly simple solutions to them. I think time will tell. I don't know that tariffs and becoming more protectionist are going to bring back the jobs and help with our rising income inequality. I don't know that just ignoring that there's climate change, we're not going to collect any data on it, we're just going to feel like this, is actually going to help us deal with it when it's actually going to end up in the, what happens when hurricane season comes and we've dismantled FEMA? I just don't understand what we think is going to happen. I'm going to make this very personal. No,
okay.
I'm not going to. I'm not going to. Look, I think, for government reform, I think we all recognize that federal government needed reform, and Bill Clinton did take it on, did it in a way that nobody even noticed, cut 400,000 jobs, 500,000 jobs, trimmed, made things much more efficient.
Did you serve in the Clinton administration? I can't remember.
I did, but not in this kind. I was at the National Economic Council. I worked on H-1B visas. Talk to me about immigration. I can tell you, give you. DOGE is not the way we're going to, not the way to generate government reform. So I think that what you saw in this election was we have these really big problems. I think President Biden was going about it in one way, and then there are other problems within the Democratic Party, which sort of got in the way of the election. And President Trump has a very simple, he knows how to sell, and he has a very straightforward, he's got an approach on immigration, he's got an approach on tariffs, and it sang to people because those are problems that we need to address. And so I think that that's where we need to be focused on, and we need to be being sincere about trying to address these really big problems.
I don't disagree with that. Let's open it up for questions from the audience. Sewell, you're right there in the front. I think that's you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sewell Chan. I'm Sewell Chan. I'm a journalist. I think the old ways of thinking about things might have been AEI, Brookings, come from different vantage points on the ideological spectrum. But I think the bigger challenge today is one of misinformation, that empiricism in general, data, facts, are not reaching people in the ways they used to. And I'm curious, as really the leader of a major research organization, you're an economist. This is not a country that understands trade-offs well. We have politicians from both ends of the aisle, from both ends of the spectrum who promise very easy fixes and not
that
a
are
sense.
Costless.
Right, it's cost-free as opposed to like, well, if we do this, this might improve, this might get worse. Stuff that we learned in introductory undergraduate economics. How do you as a social scientist, as a leader of a think tank, grapple with the new ways of reaching, the new challenges of reaching people? They may not be reading white papers or not even reading the news.
I can tell you how we're thinking about it at Brookings. So I've been in role for just a little over a year. So we're in the middle of sort of a strategic plan, if you will. But as part of our strategic review, we identified exactly this. And so we are trying to, we recognize you can't just put reports on the website and expect people to come to them, that we have to be much more proactive. We have to think of more creative ways of delivering messages for people. We are mostly in the business of trying to reach decision makers and their ecosystem. So it's not that I don't want to reach individual people, but what I recognize is we're not the New York Times. And if I wanted to be the New York Times, I need to be organized very differently than Brookings is. But that we have to, if you look at where people are getting their news, it's very polarized. So we have to break out of our usual places where we go. We're going to have to get a lot more creative with different media. So we have the white paper, but you got to pull it apart and find out the messages that are going to resonate with different people and different audiences.
And just Sewell, I have the same answer. We've spent a lot of time improving our communications team and our government relations team so that the work our scholars do can be repackaged and put in a way that's more effective in the political process. And I think we've made some progress on that, but we have a long way to go. But you're right, the whole media world is totally blown up. And if you are counting on your op-ed, as nice as the one that was in the New York Times today that cited Kevin's work, to get your message across in the New York Times, then you're fooling yourself.
Yeah.
Another question? Yes, right here.
I wanted to go back to the issue of marriage and family. So I'm a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and I frequently tell my conservative colleagues that in my lifetime, the president who most clearly articulated the connection between marriage and family structure and social outcomes was Barack Obama. He did it when he ran for president in 2007. He was criticized for it. He did it when he spoke to the young man at Morehouse. He did it when he spoke in 2013 in the South Side of Chicago. After a girl named Hydea Pendleton was killed, who had just performed at his inauguration, and he said nothing would do more to bring down violence in this community than strong families, which is why we should encourage, marriage and intact, families and fatherhood. I've noticed that it's incredibly difficult to get any national Democrat to say those things, let alone governors and even mayors, to say those things. And I'm curious why it is that people on the progressive left, center left, can talk about all types of structures, healthcare, education, criminal justice, but not family structure, and all types of institutions, but not the institution of marriage. It seems so the question is, I'll use one example. Why is it so much easier for Democrats to speak in prescriptive language about college? Everyone should go to college, and not marriage. Every child should be born to two married parents.
I don't know. I don't do politics for the Democratic Party. I don't do messaging for the.
I would only, my only comment on that is that you left out Michelle Obama's speech at the Democratic National Convention when she talked about being raised by her parents and what her father set, an example that he set in going to work, disabled, and caring for a family in a married, intact family. She was very eloquent about that.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, I think I would say you don't do politics, but you do. Melissa Carney made an expression, she said today, messages matter.
Yeah.
And as an economist, I think you think messages can have some impact on.
Yeah, I get it. I just, you're asking me to speak to why they don't. I just don't have an insight into that, right? I think that one is because I think there are people who think that there are toxic marriages, right? It's a little harder if you want to use the analogy on the everybody should go to college, which by the way, I've never subscribed to that. I think we should have high schools that really train people and give people, they should have the options, but I don't think everybody should. So already you've lost me there. I think that the problem with saying everybody should be married is not all marriages are great. Not everybody has an option. Like if you look at the incarceration rates of black men, right? You have issues of marriage markets. I mean, we can talk about interracial marriage, and I'm not trying to say it's not that. But I don't know that it's truly an option for everybody, and we know that for people to have a healthy marriage, that we need to have the whole wraparound, and we have to also address their communities and ensure they have jobs, and they need other resources as well to support a healthy marriage. So I think part of the challenge there is the institution of marriage is really, for kids to grow up in a two-parent household where the parents are, where it's a healthy relationship, that they're going to do better. But how do you create that in a way that when you're talking as a policymaker? And then are we going to talk about we're mandating it in some way? Like, I think that's where the question starts to break down. So I think that, if I'm going to speak for those who you say that I should be speaking for, I think there's been more of an emphasis on some of the conditions that would be necessary in order to create that for people to make those choices and for children to be in those situations than saying they must do that. Because if you do that without having the rest of it, it's not going to work.
Okay, well, right there, Mr. Friedman?
Yeah, we've met.
Yeah, I know.
Hi. I'm going to, I hesitate to, I don't know whether I'm asking a question or making a statement, but to do
We
this.
like
but
questions,
I'm going
so-
to take, you hate my questions. I'm going to take a risk here. So I've been involved with AEI a long time, and the thing that Robert has been talking with our trustees about a lot is impact.
Is what?
And
Impact.
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 And I'm piggybacking really on this gentleman's question, because I don't think PR and publicity is impact. So it's either a question or a challenge, and maybe you two guys, you're very impressive, by the way, we should get together. How can these think tanks have more real impact in a time of massive risk and crisis domestically and internationally? I don't expect you to have an answer today, but it's a question I would pose
How do you think about
to
it?
both of you.
I wish I had my quote from Milton Friedman, which I will be giving to my board next week. I will. You see, I think I've got friends on the right too.
There you go.
How do I think about impact? I think that is the question that we face. I think there's the short-term, all of the interesting work that our scholars are doing and that you can see right away, and some of it people really go aha, and it's right there and immediate. But the part that I was going to draw from Milton Friedman is that for many policies that actually move the needle, you may not see them right away. Because our job, and this is Milton Friedman, our job is to come up with the policy ideas, and you wait for the moment where the impossible becomes inevitable. But if you're actually going to move the needle on policy, like let's take this reconciliation bill, there's been a lot of last minute skirmishing. If they need ideas, that might be, pulling out for, we need an extra $1 billion here, and you got an idea. I don't know, I'm making it up. I'm making fun of this really hard bill that they're trying to put together. But my point is that part of the policy game is to develop ideas that doesn't mean people are going to take them right away, because it doesn't mean that the moment is right. But if you're not there with the idea ready to go when the moment just suddenly appears, which is how it happens around here, and I think that happens at the state and local level as well, is the coalition, the circumstances just come together, but they need ideas in order to get through. We were just talking about, how do we think about some of these crises that are happening or the situations we're finding ourselves in our country? We need ideas.
Yeah.
We need ideas.
So all I think about is impact, Tully. I've been trying to tell you that for 5 years. That's all I do.
No, it isn't everything, because you raise a lot of money.
And I look at it both long-term, and also specific challenges on a given day at a hurly-burly time in politics. And I ask our scholars to be responsive to both the long-term demand for big ideas and the short-term immediate demand for impact in the hurly-burly of the annual processes in Congress, and we are. Our scholars raised some concerns about the 100% refundable child tax credit, and Congress chose not to renew that. We feel we had an impact on that. The scholars that are written papers about how to reform the SNAP program, that is showing up in the administration's proposals that came out yesterday. Not everyone likes those, but
you can see it.
You can see it. And so we look at that, we've talked before about the Ukraine aid bill that was on the bubble and in doubt when President Biden was president and the Republicans in Congress were kind of reluctant. We did a lot of work on that led to the passage of that final aid bill. So we keep a scorecard and we hold ourselves accountable, and I think our supporters do too. And so I do think about it that way. I think it's I should just say, it's a little unpleasant for our scholars to hear me talk that way, because they like to point out, especially the economists, well, there are a lot of other factors going into that decision than just us. How you're putting me on the, there's demographics, there's economics, there's this, there's that. We're just a little think tank. And I say, well, cry me another.
Well, I mean, the point is what the economists are pointing out, which is true, is that this is a team sport. And so we come up with ideas and then others take it and they work with it. And so it's hard often to literally draw the straight line from scholar to something that's, we have our list of things like that too, but it's rare. But at the same time, you can see that our scholars have had an impact, and you see the shadows of it, right? Because it is a team sport, and you have to see, and they have to take the idea and mold it into whatever the opportune.
Quick response from Cecilia. I obviously am not badgering you about this, or I wouldn't feel that answer isn't a good answer. Your answer is a very clever, adroit, conventional answer, and we're running out of money, and we're running out of time, and the world's gotten dangerous.
On your side,
so I would challenge you. I would challenge you to think about more immediate responses. Let's start with education. It's one thing to recognize the problem. It's one thing to say choice is not the solution. I haven't heard a whole lot of people come up with a credible answer.
I'm with you on that.
And that's probably the domestic issue of the age.
I agree.
And without it, the people we worry about in this room aren't going to succeed.
So education people, because that's actually what my field is within economics,
Yes.
will tell you they know, you need really qualified teachers, you need smaller class sizes. All of that is really expensive. So very quickly it's a big political problem, so teachers aren't super valued, with even recruiting high quality teachers. We haven't figured out the secret sauce on that. For a while we were going down the route of we wanted to pay based on performance. That only goes so far, because it's very hard to measure value add when you've got a class of 12 students and half of them have switched in the middle year and all the things. But we know that a good teacher, a good principal can make all the difference. I mean, Ian knows this better than anybody in this room. So we know what it is, but how do you actually scale that? And where who wants to, when a lot of people are concerned that school districts waste a lot of money. So then we have to try to address that. What I'm suggesting is I don't think school choice is going to solve this problem on net at scale. It's going to give some kids an opportunity to attend better schools, and that's going to be great for those kids and their families. It will not solve your bigger problem. So I'm with you. I'm with you,
Okay,
though.
first of all, I want to bring it back to the topic of the conversation.
Oh, what was that?
Which is the progress and status of Black Americans.
Okay.
And I want to say that in the past, with you and with your colleagues
Mm-hmm.
at Brookings, AEI scholars have had the benefit of working on that challenge together and coming together and agreeing on some things that will have an impact and will have progress. And we've appreciated that. And I know with you at Brookings that we'll be able to do that in the coming days. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks a lot.
I think
I forgot the, oh yes.
he's forgotten his housekeeping.
So now, somebody is coming to dismiss you for dinner, located this evening in their dining room, which is over there. Why can't I dismiss you for dinner? Do you want to dismiss him for dinner?
It's by table.
Oh, it's by table? Okay, do it.
Is there a second part that you're supposed to read?
Let me just see. Oh, yeah. This is why you're the president of the bigger think tank. There will be a reception on the roof after dinner. That's the next thing I'm supposed to read, right? Okay.
Very good. Okay, this was a pleasure, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you.